Hello friends, today we are going to discuss the basic and fundamental ideas regarding the paleoclimatology and paleoenvironmental analysis. The aim of paleoenvironmental analysis or paleoecology is to reconstruct the biological, chemical and physical nature of the environment at the collection site or at the time of deposition. Based on the rock's paleontological record, information can be reconstructed for depositional environments, paleobathymetry positions of ancient shorelines, paleoclimate, degree of oxygenation of the bottom water and sediment, and the salinity of the waters. Paleoenvironmental analysis. The basic steps involved in the paleoenvironmental analysis are data collection, data interpretation and integration with other data sources. The kind of paleoenvironmental question to be answered determines the type of paleontological data that must be collected. Presence, abundance and relative species proportions of the paleonomorphs, foraminifera and ostracods, for example, are used to determine depositional environment and sea level fluctuations. For paleoclimatic and or paleoenvironmental interpretation, species distribution and abundance of climatically or oceanographically sensitive fossils, that is calcareous nanofossils, planktonic and benthic foraminifera, spores and pollen, for example bisaccate, conifer pollen, tropical angiosperm pollen and oxygen isotope. Analysis of foraminifera. Oxygen and salinity on the other hand is interpreted by occurrence and species distribution of foraminifera, ostracods, diatoms and salinity sensitive algae, for example Botryococcus and Periastrum. Paleoenvironmental knowledge is established by number 1, using the known tolerances of taxa or their nearest living relatives in modern environments, and number 2, studying the distribution of fossil taxa in well controlled ancient examples. The data are interpreted on the basis of this established paleoenvironmental knowledge. Travers in 1988 provides a general review of the methods of paleontological, environmental or paleoenvironmental analysis. He discusses the use of paleonomorphs as the paleoclimate indicators and the methods by which sedimentation of paleonomorph assemblage help to infer the depositional environments and both marine and non-marine settings. Additionally, Lips of 1993 provides a similar general review of the paleoenvironmental approaches for micropaleontology. Following are the 3 examples of paleoenvironmental information deduced from the micropaleontology. Number 1, species distribution and oxygen concentration. LAGO in 1987 recognizes 4 biofacies of benthic foraminiferal species in the Upper Miocene Stevens sandstone of the southern San Joaquin Valley. He demonstrates that the biofacies distribution was largely controlled by the changes in the oxygen concentration caused by the fluctuations in the position and intensity of low oxygen water within the oxygen minimum zone. Number 2, test shape and oxygen concentration. Test morphologies of some closely related species of the foraminifera genus Bolivina differ in patterns apparently related to oxygen concentration. Douglas in 1979-1981 in modern environments along the California continental margin. Compressed, relatively large species B. argentinea are typical of low oxygen environments. Next is the distribution of paleonomorph types. Whitaker et al. 1992 provides an industrial example of in the Brent group, that is Jurassic, North Sea, in which the distribution of paleonomorph types is used to infer the depositional environments and extent of delta progradation during brief intervals of the Jurassic. This information can be helpful in identifying regions of great potential or fluvial reservoir sands. Obo in 1992 develops a paleoenvironmental model of Middle Miocene reservoir units from the Niger Delta, which uses paleonomorphs and organic matter to interpret more precisely the depositional environments. This improves the understanding of the lateral continuity of the reservoir and its susceptibility to diagenetic changes. Paleoclimate. An evaluation of the climatic regime under which sedimentary successions accumulated has often been integral to the overall interpretation. It is an essential uniformitarian approach. Paleoclimatology, the understanding of the past climatic regime, that is paleoclimates, has only relatively recently become a subject in its own right and is currently undergoing a major phase of expansion. One reason for this is the light thrown by paleoclimatic studies on the natural variability that exists in the Earth's climate in the context of future anthropogenically influenced climate changes. Another is the realization that many of the Earth's sedimentary resources, for example coal, hydrocarbons and other extractable minerals, formed under particular type of climatic regime. Through time, the climate of the Earth has undergone many changes. The most recent ice age ended a mere 500 human generations ago. Astronomical data suggest that the Sun is a type that steadily increases its heat output as it ages, increasingly by about 1% about 100 million years. This represents a problem, that is the faint young sun paradox. Simply stated, in its early days, the Sun would have emitted about 45% less than its current heat output, so Earth should have been frozen. But there is an ample evidence from Earth's most ancient rocks, for example Greenland, South Africa and Australia, to suggest that aqueous processes were operating. This paradox can be overcome. It is accepted that Earth's atmosphere was much denser and much richer in greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane during its early history. The rock record makes it clear that the Earth was periodically affected by major freezes during its early history, and controversy exists over possibility that Earth periodically froze from poles to the equator, the snowball Earth hypothesis, during Proterozoic and older times. Despite the possibility that the Sun was significantly cooler 500 million years ago, abundant and widespread geological evidences suggest that through much of the subsequent time, the Earth has been significantly warmer than the present. Since the Cambrian, there appear to have been only 3 episodes that were cooler than now. One was in the Ordovician, when glaciation was centered on the present Sahara, and one was in the late Carboniferous and early Permian, with glaciation centered on the southern Gondwana. The latest ice ages took place during the Quaternary from about 1.67 million years, but a growing body of evidence suggests that this latest phase had its origin at around the Eocene-Oligocene boundary, that is 36 million years, when the ice began to accumulate over eastern Antarctica for around 250 million years. Since the late Permian, there appears to have been a period of extreme warmth, often referred to as the greenhouse world. The Earth's past climate or climatic regimes can now be simulated using the general circulation models. Henceforth, it will be called as GCMs, which is similar to the used in the long-term weather forecasting. Coming to the orbital forcing of climate. In 1875, James Croll was the first to describe the cyclic way in which the Earth's orbit behaves. The eccentricity varies from near circular to elliptical over a cycle of about 110 kilo-annum and affects the total amount of solar radiation reaching the Earth. Changes in the tilt of the Earth's axis is of rotation. Obliquity currently about 23.4 degrees, but varying between 21.8 degrees and 24.4 degrees, which affect the latitudinal distribution of the received solar radiation. It takes around 40 kilo-annum or 40,000 years. In addition, a rotational wobble in the Earth's axis of rotation, as if the poles describe a circle against the background of the stars, causes the precession of the equinoxes and takes about 22 kilo-annum to complete a cycle. In the 1930s and 1940s, Milutin Milankovitch, improving on Kroll's work, realized that each of these cycles interacts with the others to cause changes in the amount of the isolation received or insolation received by the Earth that are sufficient to promote climate changes. These cycles are now named after Milankovitch and have been used to predict the time frame of the glacial cycles in the Quaternary. Changes in the paleoclimate have been recognized in neogene oceanic sediments, which provides a meteorologic time signal synchronized with the Milankovitch time frame, and hence a means of short-term correlation that was unavailable until recently. Geological proxies of paleoclimate, sedimentary facies and paleontological data generally provides qualitative evidences of the paleoclimate and climate changes. These are paleoclimate proxies. The most climatically informative structures are glaciogenic features, that is striated pavements, tilts, tillites, etc., distinctive soil types, for example, laterites and bauxites, and indicators of aridity, for example, evaporites and eolianites. Supplementary evidence of the climate is provided by a range of other features, such as other types of paleosols, for example, calcaretes, gypcretes and vertisols, clay mineralogy reflecting weather regime, storm deposits, reefs and oolites and glenodonites and fusane from wildfires. Coals often considered to require moist tropical climates are now known to accumulate equally well in temperate mires. Critical information on the past climates, particularly quantitative information on the paleotemperature, comes from oxygen isotopic, that is delta O18 data derived from the carbonate fossils. But such data have been treated or have to be treated with due care because of the problems associated with their diagenetic resetting. Paleobotanical data, and particularly regarding plant appearance, that is physiognomy, are generally qualitative and have also been claimed to provide quantitative information. The density of leaf stomata may be related to the concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide, and there is today a striking relationship between mean annual temperature and leaf shape, that is percentage of entire margin as opposed to the toothed margin species in a biome. Entire margin leaves dominate in warm biomes. Fossils reptiles such as crocodilians, like their modern descendants, have global distribution that are principally controlled by temperature. A coldest month mean temperature of 5.5 degrees Celsius marks the minimum thermal unit for the group, corresponding to a modern mean annual temperature of called as 14.2 degrees Celsius. Such evaluations of the temperature have been successfully applied globally for the Mesozoic and Cenozoic and compared with the GCM output on climate for those times. Marine carbonates. Modern shelf seas are dominated by carbonate facies in areas where organic productivity is high. Generally in the low latitudes between about 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south, with strong insulation and warm normal salinity sea waters, which is more than 20 degrees Celsius and 35% salinity. Carbonate shelves also occur in temperate waters, particularly where rates of terrigenous runoff are low. However, rates of productivity in these areas are much lower than in the warmer waters, and the biota is dominated by different species. Nonetheless, the dominance of carbonates in a particular rock succession may not necessarily indicate warm waters, particularly for more ancient rocks in which the biota have only tenuous links with the modern forms. Present-day warm water shelves, unpolluted by fine-grained terrigenous runoff, have diverse communities with hermatypic, that is reef-building corals, and coriacean calcareous algae, and may include ooids, aggregates, and pellets. These latter grain types reflect carbonate precipitation and early cementation. This is known as the chlorozone skeletal grain associated and can be recognized as far back as the Triassic. Modern temperate water carbonate factories are dominated by benthic foraminiferans, mollusks, bryozoans, barnacles, and calcareous red algae. This is termed the Foramol skeletal grain association and can be recognized, albeit unequivocally, into the Mesozoic era. The poleward expansion of the reef and carbonate facies by about 10 degrees latitude in the Mesozoic and early Cenozoic relative to today, that is 30 degrees today to 40 degrees in the Mesozoic and Paleogene, suggests that the earth was more equable during these times. The principle of paleotemperature determination from the carbonates using oxygen isotope ratios are well established, and for many years oxygen isotopic ratios have been used to quantify sea surface temperature and bottom water temperatures. The technique has most successfully been applied using the fossil shells of organisms considered to be robust to diagenetic changes, for example, planktonic forms, coccolithic oozes, etc. Such data have shown that oceanic waters have changed their isotopic ratios in concert with the waxing and waning of the ice caps during quaternary glacial cycles. The oceans becoming relatively depleted during the glacial episodes shells, therefore, delta O18 enrichment by comparison with interglacials in the longer term, the delta O18 trend for ocean water suggests that seawater has become progressively depleted in oxygen 16, leading to a positive oxygen 18 values. Since about 55 million years, this has occurred in a series of steps, probably reflecting first the cooling of deep waters, followed by onset of permanent ice on the Antarctica at around the Eocene-Oligocene boundary. Then followed a series of significant, more positive excursions through the Oligocene and Miocene before a major permanent swing in the Miocene, that is 15 million years, which is taken to reflect the formation of the Antarctic ice sheet. The growth of the northern hemisphere ice sheets is marked by a further more positive excursion in the quaternary. Coming to evaporites, evaporite salts may form anywhere on earth where evaporation exceeds rainfall. Their preservation is controlled by the nature of the post-depositional climate, the ingress of groundwaters, and subsequent burial history. Modern coastal evaporites accumulate between 15 degree and 35 degree latitudes, but intracontinental evaporites may occur beyond 50 degree, sometimes being frozen for several months in the year, so salts do not necessarily imply the permanent warmth. The formation and the preservation of the more soluble salts of potassium requires low atmospheric humidity, which should be less than 50%. Salts may form very rapidly under ideal conditions, 100 meters in 1 kilo annum. So short-lived episodes of the evaporation may lead to the gray thickness of salts. Coming to the glaciogenic and cold water sediments, about 10% of the earth is covered by ice today, but this increased to 30% during the Quaternary glacials. Ice and permafrost provides a series of erosional and depositional fingerprints. For example, striated parments and boulders, drop stones, ice wedges and glacial tilts or dynamic tone, as well as a range of geomorphological features such as askers, cames, etc., some of which have been recognized in association with the ancient glacial systems, for example in the lower Paleozoic of the Sahara and the late Paleozoic of Gondwana. However, boulders may be dropped into deep water through mechanisms other than ice rafting, for example from the roots of the floating trees. More cryptic evidence of the cold water precipitation comes from the glindonites, the carbonate nodules pseudomorphing the mineral echolite or echite, the low temperature polymorph of calcium carbonate, that is CaCO3.6H2O. It is today associated with the clathrates in cold deep waters and in shallow polar waters. Glindonites are reported from Cretaceous localities in Australia and Canada and from the Jurassic of Siberia. Coals and lignites. Coals and lignites are indicative of an excess of precipitation over evaporation. Vegetation accumulates in wetland mires, which, if rain occurs on most days of the year, will grow upwards above the general level of the regional water table. Preservation of peat requires rapid burial and or oxygen condition or anoxic conditions. Frigid conditions favors preservation, as do environments in which rainfall is evenly spread throughout the year. Today, such conditions occur in equatorial zones and in high mid-latitudes. In the Mesozoic, equatorial zones appear to have been more arid than they are today. Wildfires and paleozoics. Fusane, almost pure carbon in sedimentary rocks, is a product of wildfires. Natural fires, mostly triggered by lightning strikes, are favored in strongly seasonal climates where vigorous plant growth is promoted by a distinct wet season, followed by a dry season, creating tinder that becomes fire-prone during thunderstorms at the onset of the next wet season. Fusane-rich sediments are frequently associated with other evidence of strong seasonality, distinct wet-dry seasons, such as vertisols and associated smectite-rich clay mineralogies and calcretes. Laterites or ferricretes reflect the relative accumulation of hematite, goethite, aluminium hydroxide, for example gypsite, and kaolinite within soil profiles. Pyrogenic and groundwater laterites form best in humid tropical climate with a distinct dry season. Bauxite, that is aluminous or aluminum-rich laterite, often occur in association with laterites. Some, like those of the Cretaceous of the Tethyan region, occur on karstic surfaces cut into carbonate platforms. In such cases, the detrital materials are likely to have been brought into the system, probably by aeolial activity. Clay minerals in oceanic sediments reflect the weathering processes in the adjacent continental areas and the climatically controlled distribution of soils. Differential settling causes some depositional segregation of clay species, for example nearshore accumulation of kaolinite. Nonetheless, recognizable patterns in the ancient can be preserved. Aeolianites. Although coastal dune complexes may form across a range of latitudes, major sand seas occur predominantly in arid environments. Such eolianites provide both local and regional paleowind data, which may be used to test paleoclimate model generated by GCMs. Coming to paleoclimate models, a recent approach to understanding the past climate regimes on Earth has been through the application of complex computer models, specifically atmospheric general circulation models, that is AGCMs, ocean general circulation model, that is OGCMs, and recently even more complex coupled oceanic atmosphere general circulation model, that is OAGCMs. There are now many contributions in this field, the paleoclimatic approach having been pioneered by John Kurzbach and Eric Barron. General circulation models, that is GCMs, use the law of physics and an understanding of the past geography to simulate climatic responses. They are objective in character. They require powerful computers to handle vast number of calculations. Nevertheless, it is now possible to compare the results of different GCMs for a range of times and over a wide range of parameterizations for the past, present and future. For example, in terms of predictions of surface air temperature, surface moisture, precipitation, etc. GCMs are currently producing simulated climate predictions for the Mesozoic and Cenozoic that compare favorably with the distribution of the geological climate proxies discussed. They can be used effectively to predict sites of oceanic upwelling and the distribution of petroleum source rocks and phosphorites. Models also produce evaluations of parameters that do not leave a geological record, for example, cloud cover, snow cover, and quasi-parametric phenomena such as storminess. Parameterization is the main weakness of the GCM, for example, paleogeography, paleobathymetry along with sea surface temperature, orography, cloud behavior and model output for continental interiors are still colder in winter than indicated by paleontological data. The sedimentary and paleontological records provides an important way for evaluating GCMs, and this is important because the same GCMs are currently being used to predict possible changes in the future climate. The model was developed at the Hartley Centre for Climate Prediction and Research, which is part of the UK Meteorological Office. The GCM consists of a linked atmospheric model, ocean model and sea ice model. The horizontal resolution of the atmospheric model is 2.5 degree latitudes and 3.75 degree latitudes and longitudes. This provides grid spacing at the equator of 278 km north-south and 417 km east-west. The atmospheric models consist of 19 layers. It also includes a radiation scheme that can represent the effect of minor trace gases. Its land surfaces scheme includes a representation of the freezing and melting of the soil moisture. The representation of evaporation includes the dependence of stomatal resistance on temperature, vapor pressure and carbon dioxide concentration. There is an adiabatic diffusion scheme to simulate the horizontal mixing of the tracers. The ocean models has the same spatial resolution as the atmospheric model and 20 vertical layers with a time step of 30 minutes. Thank you very much.